cliff road's broken milestone, the drowned meridian house remained. All iron windows, chalk white pillars, and clocks gone blind with weather stains. Inside the tables held old instruments, brass arcs asleep in salted light, while shallow sea water crossed the floorboards like a second sky coming at night. Charts were pinned beneath warped glass covers, their coastlines feathered pale with years, and every measured line once drawn for certainty looks softer now, almost sincere. I came there with my lost directions, all my wrong turns folded in my coat, thinking every misstep marked me forever, thinking a drifting heart could never float. But in the silver bloom of the drowned meridian house, even error opened into grace, not corrected back to some perfection, just held in a kinder kind of place. And the tide along the instrument tables moved like mercy over tarnished chrome. I thought redemption would arrive as a rescue. It came like finding I could be unknown and still be home. At the center of the eastern chamber, a meridian ring stood thin and wide, its axis green with years of sea wind, its shadow trembling with the tide. Nearby, a drawer of pocket compasses lay scattered in a velvet tray, their needles slow, their glass all clouded, still trying softly to agree with day. One map showed routes through vanished currents, ports renamed by storms and time, and in the margins someone penciled, not all arrivals happen by design. I read that line while dawn kept gathering in the skylight's fractured silver frame, and something in me long called failure lost its soul and punishing name. Then the whole room brightened without warning, not gold but pearl and lunar white, and every tool once built for fixing looked content to simply catch the light. So in the silver bloom of the drowned meridian house, even my unrest began to slow, not steered back toward a single answer, just given enough horizon to let go. And the tide along the instrument tables moved like mercy over tarnished chrome. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like finding I could be Let the compasses rest where they fall. Let the tide rewrite the room in whispers down the dim blue length of every wall. In the silver bloom of the drowned meridian house, I learned the heart can lose its way and stay, not because the storm returns the old coordinates, but because the light still finds the room by day. Beyond the shuttered stalls and boardwalk weather, the moon pool arcade kept humming low. All busted pinball constellations, all prize glass fogged with undertow. The claw machine stood like small chapels, empty-jawed in violet dust, while ticket spools hung damp and curling like vows gone soft with time and rust. At the center, under cracked skylight panels, the moon pool held a colder blue, gathering every failed reflection to rings the neon drifted through. I came there with my spin illusions, all my bright wrong gods of noise and speed, thinking I had traded too much wonder, thinking gentleness was not for me. But in the cathedral static of the moon pool arcade, even broken lights could blast the floor, not revived into their old excitement, just shining in a quieter language than before. And the water kept returning every color as a softer, trembling kind of true. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like learning what the silence knew. Near the back, beside the faded ski ball alleys, the counter still displayed its little hoard. Plastic stars, tin rings, cheap velvet dolphins, all the minor heavens children once adored. A mirror, salt bitten at the edges, held my outline with a wavering grace. For once I did not look like damage, just someone the blue light had agreed to place. There was a jukebox, dark as tide glass, its song list blurred to pearl and rain. But when I pressed one clouded button, a hush of static bloomed like prayer again. No anthem came, no grand returning, just a soft electric weather in the room. And somehow that unfinished music made more shelter than a perfect tune. skylights filled cathedral blue, turning every cabinet into stained glass. And all the games built once for winning looked relieved to simply let the light pass. So in the cathedral static of the moon pool arcade, even my restless heart grew kind. Now it cured of all its old false hungers, just slowed enough to leave some of them behind. And the water kept returning every color as a softer, trembling kind of true. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like learning what the silence knew. Beyond the harbor clinic ruins, the tide glass orphanarium stood, all peeling stars along the ceilings, all corridors gone dim with driftwood light. Its windows held the morning strangely, pale gold folded into wavering blue, while seawater crossed the nursery tiles and made the painted foxes shimmer through. White iron beds stood in their still rows, small as vows nobody came to keep. Paper moons turned from the rafters in the salted air above my feet. I came there with my earliest weather, all my vanished names and unslept nights, thinking tenderness had missed me once, keep missing me for all my life. But in the pale gold weather of the tide glass orphanarium, even the oldest day grew small enough to hold, not undone into a kinder childhood, just warmed where it had always gone. Redemption would arrive as a rescue. It came like learning I could love what had been left alone. At the end of one long mural hallway, a music box lay open on a chair, its ballerina gone, its velvet faded, still spilling little chimes into the air. Nearby, a cabinet of combs and ribbons glimmered faintly under dust and salt, and in the glass I caught a softer outline, not erased, just no longer made a fault. One room still held a chalkboard alphabet, half the letters hours blurred by rain and years, as if the language of beginning had been washed clean of punishment and fear. I traced an A, then M, then silence, watched the lights light golden on the slate, and something in me small and long forsaken stopped waiting at the wrong door quite so late. Then all the tide glass windows brightened, turning every bed to pearl and flame, and every empty little mattress looked less like loss, and space prepared for grace. So in the pale gold weather of the tide glass orphanarium, even my hidden self came near, not restored to what it never had, just finally met with a voice that stayed to hear. And the water moving through the playroom made the morning sound like breath returning slow. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like learning I could love what had been left alone. Beyond the harbor's outer railing, the breakwater museum stood, all pale stone stairs and weathered banners, all windows filmed with brine and blue. Inside the cases held old voyages, miniature storms beneath the glass, while shallow seawater crossed the floorboards and stitched the room with light that passed. Ship portraits leaned in tarnished frames there, captains dim as unsent names, and brass sextants slip beside white shells like relics no one thought to claim. I came there with my sunken years, all the wreckage I had learned to hide, thinking anything that broke in water could only live as loss inside. But in the ivory drift of the breakwater museum, even ruin wore a tender glow, not raised back whole from what had taken it, just held where the drowned things still could show. And the tide along the marble baseboards moved like mercy through each silent room. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like finding beauty did not cancel doom. At the far end of the eastern gallery, a lifeboat hung from iron beams, its paint peeled thin to bone and silver, its rope gone soft as sleeping reeds. Beneath it lay a book of passenger names, ink blurred to islands on the page, and in the margin someone penciled dates the sea had gently rubbed away. One compass with a cracked enamel face still carried north in something in me long abandoned, quit confusing grief with being incomplete. Then dawn came wider through the windows, ivory, pearl, and diluted gold. And every case of wrecked remembrance looked less like burial than being told. So in the ivory drift of the breakwater museum, even my oldest sorrow grew light. Not gone, not turned to simple lesson, just easier to carry in the morning white. And the tide along the marble baseboards move like mercy through each silent room. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like finding beauty did not cancel doom. Beneath the lighthouse on the headland, the hollow bathing rooms remained, all steamed glass, chipped enamel, all brass hooks gone pale with spray. The tide had reached the lower chambers, filled the basins through the grate, and morning pooled in broken tiles like something small that chose to wait. White curtains breathed along their rails, their thin as skin and twice as kind, while lanterns salt whitened in the corners held a dim and milky shine. I came there with my carried silt, all my old sediment of shame, thinking what had sunk inside me would always rise with the same old stain. But in the pearl static of the hollow lighthouse baths, even sorrow thinned into the steam, not vanished from the body altogether, just loosened from the places it had been. And the water in the cracks, blue basins, moved like mercy with no need to speak. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like learning how to set things down and sink in peace. At the end, beyond the cedar screens, a round pool open to the dawn, mosaic steps descending softly into silver water, pale and warm. A row of lockers leaned half open, holding combs, a faded robe, and one small bar of violet soap worn down to something almost gone. I touched the rim of a shattered mirror, my face came back in waves of light, not clear, just less accused somehow, as if the steam had changed its mind. From overhead the lighthouse turned slowly, its beam made dim by morning haze, and every sweep across the bathhouse felt less like warning than like grace. Then the tide beneath the floor stones answered with a low and tidal breathing sound, and something in me clenched for years, unclosed without a witness around. So in the pearl static of the hollow lighthouse baths, even my oldest hurt went still, not healed into a bride. stood knee-deep inside that softness, not remade, not innocent, not new, just briefly free of all the hard outlines I'd drawn around the truth. Let the bath keep all their pearl-lit silence, let the tide return beneath the floor. Let the violet soap dissolve to fragrance through the damp and empty corridors. In the pearl static of the hollow lighthouse baths, I learned the heart need not be scrubbed clean, only held inside a gentler water until it quits resisting what it means. Behind the battered outer seawall, the old conservatory stayed. All cracked glass ribs and iron lattice, all green made dim by weathered haze. The orchids had long since lost their names there, their little plaques gone white with salt, while vines climbed through the shattered rafters like mercy bypassing human fault. Moth pale lamps still burned at morning, faint as breath, untarnished chrome and shallow tide slid through the pathways, making every stone path seem half dream, half home. I came there with my blighted seasons, all the parts of me I'd left to spoil, thinking tenderness was only meant for things still easy, young and whole. But in the mothlight mercy of the seawall conservatory, even ruin learned the shape of bloom, not restored to some unbroken garden, just given air and patience in the humid room. And the tide between the cracked terrariums moved like kindness through the fern cold blue. I thought redemption would arrive as a rescue. It came like learning damaged things can still grow toward the truth. At the center stood a fallen arbor, its white paint peeled to pearl and green, and underneath the marble bench held seed husks, dust and rain and silver seams. One glass case half collapsed and fogging still protected a single climbing rose, its stem gone wild around the hinges, flowering where no careful gardener chose. Nearby a tray of empty pots was lined in rings of mineral white, and something in those patient circles felt less like failure than a life. I touched a leaf with salt along its edges, it bent but would not fully break. And in that small resistant softness I felt my own heart's sorrow reawake. Not to wound me, but to show me how long I'd confused survival with decay. Then dawn spilled amber through the roofline, turning every web to woven fire, and all the overgrown disorder looked less forsaken than inspired. So in the mothlight mercy of the seawall conservatory, even my barren hours turned mild, not healed into some easy springtime, just made tender enough to shelter what stayed wild. And the tide between the cracked terrariums moved like kindness through the fern-cold blue. I thought redemption would arrive as a rescue. It came like learning damaged things can still grow toward the truth. Above the breakwater's last white railing, the sleeping funicular kept the dawn. All fogged glass roofs and faded timetables, all silver rails gone dim and long. The carriage waited on the incline, its windows pearled with salted air, while down below the tide kept breathing through the cable's low impatient prayer. Old ticket gates stood half unfastened, route maps curled against the wall, their painted arrows still suggesting there was somewhere kind beyond the fall. I came there with my stalled horizon, all my years of standing still, thinking change belonged to braver people, thinking hurt was safer on the hill. But in the silver wake beneath the sleeping funicular, even stillness started learning how to sway, not torn from where it had been rooted, just coaxed toward a softer kind of a way. And the fog along the quiet rail line moved like mercy no one had to prove. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like trusting I was allowed to move. Inside the upper station office, a brass lever caught the morning flame, and on the bench lay one torn glove beside a ledger softened by the rain. Someone had penciled in the margin small delays, departures, weather tide, ordinary notes of interrupted motion that somehow made the stillness feel alive. I touched the carriage door and felt it with a hollow, almost human tone. And something in me, long suspended, quit mistaking pause for stone. Below the sea climbed pale through vapor, above gulls crossed the thinning gray, and every slanting length of rail there looked less like danger than a way. Then dawn widened through the roof panes, silver, pearl, and faintest blue, and all the waiting in that station felt less abandoned and passing through. So in the silver wake beneath the sleeping funicular, even my fear of change grew light, not healed into a shining certainty, just willing for once to ride. And the fog along the quiet rail line moved like mercy no one had to prove. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like trusting I was allowed to move. Past the seawall's iron stairwell, the breaker library kept its hush. All tall windows filmed with morning, all oak on silvers by the brine. Reading tables stood in stillness, ankle deep in tidal glass, while floating slips from card catalogs drifted by like names let pass. Brass lamps wore a honey dimness, half alive against the gray, and atlases with swollen bindings held their continents in waves. I came there with my marked up history, every line I could not outgrow, thinking memory was a sentence, thinking pain was what the pages meant to show. But in the opaline hours of the breaker library, even sorrow changed its tone, not erased from every chapter, just read with kinder light than I had known. And the tide between the fallen book stacks moved like mercy through the muted blue. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like learning the old story was not the only truth. In the map room, watercolor coastlines bled softly into pearl and green, every border loosening at the edges, like certainty forgetting what it means. A ladder leaned against the fiction shelves, its wheels gone still with salt and age, and on the floor a book lay open to a scene where Small pencil stars beside a line, as if some stranger years before me had also needed proof that loss could change its mind. I touched the spine of a blue-bound volume. It opened with a weathered sigh, and something in me long footnoted rose whole enough to meet my eye. Then dawn spread wider through the windows, opal cream and diluted gold, and every flooded row of language looked less ruined than retold. So in the opaline hours of the breaker library, even my oldest shame grew thin, not healed into a spotless ending, just no longer read as evidence against my skin. And the tide between the fallen book stacks moved like mercy through the muted blue. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like learning the old story was not the only truth. At the edge of the sea wine district, the glass house station kept its glow, all pale signals and fogged-in skylights, all tiled silence washed in rose. Vines had climbed the timetable columns, wrapped the letters into green, while shallow tide along the platform held the lamps in trembling sheen. The ticket window wore salt film, coins asleep beneath the drawer, and old route signs bent toward the rafters like they still believed in more. I came there with my practiced waiting, all the years I called not yet, thinking life would start the moment I became someone worth the trip. But in the pale signal of the drowned glass house station, even delay began to breathe, not banished by some grand arrival, just loosened from the faith that I had to burn my leave. And the tide along the silent platform moved like mercy through the pearled up blue. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like stepping forward when no one gave the cue. One tram car rested past the turntable, its window silvered by the mist, full of seats gone soft with weather, and handrails cold as moonlit wrists. A potted fig had split its container, roots reaching through the station floor. And in that slow, unlicensed growing, I felt a door where there'd been none before. washed to almost color, its shape still holding after rain. I touched the rail beside the boarding line, it hummed with some remaining heat. And something in me long postponed quit mistaking stillness for defeat. Then dawn came clear through cracked roof panels, opal silver diluted gold, and every waiting thing around me looked less abandoned than untold. So in the pale signal of the drowned glass house station, even my old caution lost its throne, not healed into some fearless motion, just willing finally to be the one who goes. And the tide along the silent platform moved like mercy through the pearled up blue. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like stepping forward when no one gave the cue. Beyond the seawall's inner colonnade, the lantern bath still held the rain. All ivory steam and broken skylights, all marble dim with silver stains. Warm pools remembered vanished voices, their surfaces untroubled, pale, while lantern chains swayed in the drift light and made slow halos through the veil. Abandoned robes hung by the archways, soft as ghosts that chose to stay, and brass taps screened along the basins where salt and time had learned to pray. I came there with my sealed off sorrows, all the blame I'd worn like skin, thinking I had to be made spotless before mercy could begin. But in the ivory rain of the lantern baths, even grief undid its fists, not washed into some sainted silence, just held so gently it could finally loosen its grip and steam along the mosaic corridors, move like kindness through the pearl blue air. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like learning I did not have to suffer to be spared. At the farthest room around stone basin, caught rainwater from the fractured dome, each drop widening into circles that touched and vanished into one. Mirrors blurred with mineral breathing gave my face back cracked enamel cup, and in those small remains of tending I felt something quiet lifting up. I touched the edge of a cooling handrail. Water ran over my wrist like light, and something in me long accused quit rehearsing every old indictment. And dawn turned warmer through the skylights. Cream and silver faint rose flame, and every pool of glass like judgment, then a place where it could change. So in the ivory rain of the lantern baths, even my shame released its name, not healed into immaculate absence, just no longer asking pain to prove I'd changed. And the steam along the mosaic corridors moved like kindness through the pearl blue air. I thought redemption would arrive as rescue. It came like learning I did not have to suffer.